Aria never imagined her career would shatter in a single morning. Fired just hours before presenting the billion-dollar project she built from nothing. But the deeper betrayal came from the man she trusted most. Her fiancé, Damien, who secretly orchestrated her downfall so he could elope with the CEO's daughter and seize power for himself. Humiliated yet unbroken, Aria follows a single clue, a boarding pass with Damien's name, uncovering a conspiracy far larger than heartbreak. Each step pulls her into a deadly corporate war led by a hidden mastermind determined to erase her. But Aria refuses to fall. This time, she's fighting back. And the final move will be hers. In a stunning development inside one of the nation's most influential tech conglomerates, rising corporate star Aria Sullivan was abruptly dismissed this morning. Ironically, on the very day she was scheduled to unveil a billion-dollar innovation project that analysts had predicted would redefine the company's future. Witnesses described the atmosphere as tense and disbelieving as Aria was escorted from the executive floor, leaving employees stunned and scrambling for answers. Internal sources reveal that Aria's termination was pushed through during a confidential, unscheduled board session held just hours before her pivotal presentation. The move raised immediate questions, as Aria had consistently been hailed as one of the company's strongest assets. The timing, secrecy, and lack of explanation have fueled speculation throughout the organization. What emerged next was even more shocking. Evidence indicating that Aria's own fiancé, Damien Ward, had quietly influenced several board members to vote against her. According to an insider familiar with the decision, Damien initiated the conversation days earlier, lobbying for Aria's removal under the guise of protecting long-term corporate stability. The revelation has sent ripples through the upper ranks, where many are now questioning the integrity of the boardroom. Investigators close to the situation report that Damien's interference appears to be tied to an undisclosed personal agenda. Multiple sources claim Damien has been preparing to elope with the CEO's daughter. A detail that, if confirmed, suggests a possible conflict of interest and a manipulation of corporate power for personal gain. Neither Damien nor the CEO's office has issued a statement. Aria, visibly shaken but composed, left the building carrying only a small stack of documents handed to her by HR. But the story took another turn when she opened her termination packet in the lobby and discovered something unexpected. A boarding pass tucked between the papers, printed under Damien's name with a departure scheduled for later that day. The discovery immediately raised suspicions about whether her firing was timed to clear the path for Damien's secret departure. The company now faces mounting scrutiny as employees, shareholders, and industry analysts demand transparency surrounding the abrupt dismissal of one of its most valuable innovators. As questions continue to unravel and tensions climb inside the corporate tower, one thing is certain. This firing is only the beginning of a much larger scandal poised to explode. The fallout from Aria Sullivan's shocking termination continued to escalate throughout the afternoon, with new details emerging that cast an even darker shadow over the company's executive leadership. What began as a sudden dismissal has transformed into a rapidly unfolding scandal. One that now appears to involve personal betrayal, corporate manipulation, and a potential breach of internal security protocols. Shortly after discovering the boarding pass hidden in her termination packet, Aria sought clarification from colleagues she trusted. Several sources confirmed that Damien Ward had been acting unusually confident in recent days, holding private meetings with board members and using his influence in areas far outside his normal responsibilities. His behavior, once considered charmingly ambitious, is now being re-evaluated under a far more sinister lens. Insiders have revealed that the relationship between Aria and Damien may have been compromised long before today's events. Leaked internal messages suggest Damien had been quietly feeding information to an unidentified executive ally. Information that allegedly included early drafts of Aria's billion-dollar project proposal. If verified, this would indicate a calculated effort to undermine her work from the inside. The potential involvement of the CEO's daughter has further ignited speculation. According to travel coordination records reviewed by investigative staff, the boarding pass found by Aria matches a flight booked under a private company account, one that has previously been used exclusively for executive family travel. This connection has heightened concerns that Aria's firing was part of a larger scheme orchestrated to protect personal interests rather than corporate ones. Employees who witnessed Aria's removal are now coming forward with their own observations. Several reported seeing Damien leaving the boardroom just minutes before security arrived to escort Aria out. Others claim he looked unervingly calm, as though he had anticipated the chaos that would follow. The contrast between Aria's shock and Damien's serenity has only deepened suspicions regarding his role in the decision. As tensions rise inside the company, More documents are surfacing that point to a coordinated effort to discredit Aria's professional integrity. Anonymous sources have described internal memos circulated shortly before the board meeting that questioned Aria's leadership and decision-making, claims contradicted by her exemplary performance records and recent industry awards. Meanwhile, legal advisors connected to the board are reportedly scrambling to manage the internal panic. One advisor, speaking under condition of anonymity, admitted that the firing may not hold up under formal scrutiny, especially if Damien's influence over the decision can be proven. The board now faces a possible internal investigation that could expose procedural failures and personal misconduct. Aria herself has remained silent publicly, but close associates say she is gathering evidence of her own. The unexpected discovery of the boarding pass seems to have ignited a determination within her, not to seek sympathy, but to uncover the truth behind her removal. Those who know her describe Aria as someone who never backs down when cornered. The company's shareholders are demanding immediate answers as the situation threatens to disrupt upcoming quarterly announcements. With rumors circulating of potential insider manipulation, the market is beginning to react, and analysts warn that confidence could plummet if the company does not address the crisis promptly and transparently. As night falls, the corporate tower remains lit with frantic activity. Executives pace behind closed doors, employees monitor internal chat channels for updates, and across the lobby where Aria once stood, the tension is unmistakable. What began as a sudden firing has evolved into a high-stakes battle for truth, one that is far from reaching its climax. The corporate tower woke the next morning to a chilling revelation. Despite being locked out of the system, Aria Sullivan's digital signature had appeared inside several restricted databases overnight. IT security teams panicked, assuming a breach, only to discover that the access points matched old architecture Aria herself had designed years earlier. She had become, as one analyst whispered, a ghost inside the company she built. Executives scrambled to contain the situation, but the damage was already done. Files related to the billion-dollar innovation project, previously thought to be lost after Aria's firing, had been duplicated and flagged with red alerts. More alarmingly, a hidden folder appeared, containing encrypted recordings and internal memos suggesting that her proposal had been systematically stolen and repackaged under another division. Investigators believe Damien had a direct role in this covert transfer. As digital forensics teams worked through the night, they found a second disturbance. A trail of system pings originating from an external network not registered with the company. The timestamps aligned perfectly with the moment Aria discovered Damien's boarding pass in her termination packet. This has led investigators to believe she began tracing Damien's movements almost immediately after leaving the building. She wasn't defeated, one insider said. She was hunting. The most explosive discovery, however, came from reviewing private communications between Damien and the CEO's daughter. According to leaks from within the admin department, the two had exchanged messages referencing a departure deadline, paperwork executed, and clearing the runway for a final meeting offshore. These phrases are now believed to be linked directly to the flight scheduled under Damien's name, the same ticket Aria found by accident. Corporate leadership attempted to intercept the growing scandal by releasing a brief statement assuring stakeholders that all internal protocols were secure. But this claim collapsed within hours when more details emerged about a suspicious meeting involving Damien, the CEO's daughter, and two board members. The meeting took place the night before Aria's termination and reportedly focused on protecting company assets from external risk, a phrase that now seems to have been code for removing Aria entirely. Employees across multiple departments have since come forward, reporting multiple system glitches, disappearing files, and unusual admin activity connected to Damien's account. One cybersecurity specialist described the situation as a digital war zone with footprints leading from inside and outside the network. The company is now forced to consider whether Damien's influence extended far deeper than anyone realized. The boarding pass discovered by Aria has also become a focal point of the investigation. Travel logs confirm that the private flight Damien booked was scheduled for late tonight, departing from a restricted executive terminal often used for confidential international negotiations. With the evidence of data theft piling high, investigators suspect Damien intended to leave the country with stolen intellectual property. Meanwhile, Aria's closest colleagues report that she is operating with razor-sharp focus, piecing together evidence with unmatched precision. Though still officially terminated, her knowledge of the company's older systems, many of which she coded herself, has allowed her to access records no one else knew existed. She vanished from the office, a senior strategist said, but she never left the battlefield. Chaos erupted inside the company's cybersecurity command center this afternoon when multiple internal systems simultaneously triggered high-priority alerts, each one traced back to a single origin. The same shadow access Aria Sullivan used to expose the hidden files last night. But this time, investigators realized the truth too late. Aria wasn't just uncovering evidence anymore. She was intercepting Damien's escape. According to internal logs reviewed by analysts, Aria breached the company's executive travel platform at dawn, navigating layers of outdated security architecture she once helped design. Within minutes, she accessed restricted travel manifests, flight permissions, and the clearance schedule for the very aircraft Damien planned to board tonight. Her presence inside the system set off multiple silent alarms, sending the IT team into a frenzy as they attempted, and failed, to isolate her. Meanwhile, private communications recovered from the CEO's daughter's encrypted messaging service revealed frantic messages urging Damien to leave earlier and avoid delays at all costs. These warnings came just hours after Aria's digital intrusion was detected, suggesting she had struck a nerve. "She knows," one message read. "We have to move before she reaches the terminal." Investigators believe the couple began accelerating their plans the moment they learned Aria was still fighting back. By mid-morning, corporate leadership realized Aria's actions were not acts of vengeance, they were targeted strikes. She had pulled data linking Damien to offshore accounts, accessed contract drafts matching the stolen billion-dollar idea, and even flagged inconsistencies in the CEO's daughter's financial records. Aria was building a case powerful enough to indict multiple high-ranking individuals, and she was doing it in real time. The most dramatic development came when Aria successfully forced the company's emergency travel lockdown feature, normally reserved for critical threats, into activation. This triggered a cascade of security protocols across all executive airports. Flights were flagged, manifests were frozen, and the clearance system stalled for more than 30 minutes. During that time, Damien attempted to override the restrictions but was denied repeatedly, sparking panic within the executive suite. One employee stationed near the executive helipad reported seeing Damien pacing aggressively while making a series of heated phone calls. Witnesses described his demeanor as desperate, a stark contrast to the calculated confidence he displayed during Aria's termination. "He knew someone was closing in," the witness said. "He just didn't know how fast." As investigators reviewed the expanded data trail, they discovered that Aria's intrusion had also reached the International Aviation Registry. This allowed her to silently flag Damien's flight for high-risk departure, a designation that immediately alerts both airport authorities and federal regulators. Within minutes, his name appeared on the global no-fly monitoring board, an extraordinary move that left executives stunned. Inside the tower, the board attempted to contain the fallout, but the situation spun out of control when the security director confirmed that the alert had already reached airport headquarters. The CEO reportedly erupted in anger upon learning the flight was compromised, demanding immediate action to correct the error. But by then, Aria had sealed the system with a fail-safe code known only to former developers. No one could reverse it. Employees say the atmosphere inside the building has shifted from confusion to pure crisis mode. Analysts are racing to determine how Aria bypassed multiple layers of security, while legal teams fear the growing volume of evidence she has uncovered. Many now believe the scandal is on the verge of public exposure, as Aria continues unearthing secrets that threaten the entire leadership structure. Authorities at the city's private executive airport were thrown into disarray this evening when the high-risk alert tied to Damien Ward's scheduled international departure triggered an immediate lockdown of the terminal. Security personnel scrambled to verify the legitimacy of the alert, only to discover conflicting signals coming from both the company headquarters and the aviation registry. At the center of the confusion was one name repeatedly flashing on their screens: Aria Sullivan. As the alert spread, Damien arrived at the terminal with the CEO's daughter at his side. Witnesses say the pair appeared agitated, speaking in hushed, frantic tones while attempting to persuade staff that the alert was a technical mistake. However, when airport authorities cross-checked the registry, they found Aria's digital imprint embedded deep within the flight's clearance log, indicating intentional interference. "Someone has locked the system from inside," a technician reported. "Whoever did it knew exactly what to target." Meanwhile, a surge of new evidence originating from Aria's continued digital infiltration reached investigators at headquarters. Encrypted emails revealed extensive coordination between Damien, the CEO's daughter, and at least 2 board members to siphon Aria's billion-dollar project concept into a private offshore venture. This discovery intensified suspicion that the couple's sudden departure was less an elopement and more an attempted escape from accountability. As authorities struggled to stabilize the terminal, Aria herself made an unexpected appearance. She arrived through a public entrance, hood up, face set, determination unmistakable. Airport staff who recognized her from internal employee passes described her presence as calm but intense, as though she had come not to confront chaos, but to end it. Her arrival sent shockwaves through onlookers who had followed the story since her explosive termination. Sources say Damien froze the moment he saw Aria step into the private lounge. The CEO's daughter reacted instantly, urging security to escort Aria out, insisting she was a disgruntled ex-employee causing trouble. But Aria countered by pulling out printed documents, email chains, financial transfers, stolen prototypes. Evidence so overwhelming that one guard reportedly hesitated before following orders. She didn't yell, the witness said. She let the facts do the speaking. In a dramatic twist, Aria presented a final piece of evidence. A time-stamped recording of Damien discussing the plan to remove her. The recording, captured inadvertently during a boardroom test of the company's new AI transcription system, included Damien's voice stating, "Once she's out, the project becomes ours. By the time she realizes it, we'll be on the plane." Gasps echoed through the terminal as the recording played aloud. The CEO's daughter attempted to flee toward the secured jet, but Aria had already anticipated the move. Moments earlier, she had activated the second phase of the flight lockdown, a security trigger that darkened the runway's navigation lights and halted all aircraft movement. Pilots were instructed to power down until further notice, grounding Damien's escape entirely. "The runway is dead," an air traffic officer confirmed. "Nobody's leaving tonight." With tensions reaching a boiling point, airport security moved in to question Damien. His composure shattered as he realized the net had closed around him. Those present described him as visibly unraveling, cycling between anger, denial, and fear. Chaos inside the executive terminal spilled into the airport's upper command levels as authorities scrambled to process the avalanche of evidence Aria Sullivan had delivered. The flight lockdown she initiated remained firmly in place, leaving Damien Ward and the CEO's daughter stranded on the ground. But the real shock came when investigators traced the override command to the control tower, a location now hosting an unexpected visitor, Aria herself. According to multiple tower staff members, Aria entered quietly moments after her confrontation in the lounge. Using credentials she had never surrendered after her firing, she accessed the restricted elevators and reached the tower floor before anyone could question her presence. Once inside, she calmly identified herself and handed over a sealed drive containing the stolen project data, boardroom recordings, and proof of Damien's offshore dealings. "She walked in like she belonged there," an air traffic coordinator said. "No hesitation, no fear." The control tower became the nerve center of a crisis spiraling far beyond airport boundaries. Investigators from the Aviation Authority, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Corporate Integrity Agency converged on the site within minutes, demanding immediate access to the encrypted files Aria provided. Reports indicate that the data included detailed logs showing how Damien and his partners rerouted millions of dollars into hidden accounts through shell companies tied to the CEO's daughter. Back at the lockdown terminal below, Damien made repeated attempts to contact upper management, desperately insisting he was the victim of a corporate sabotage plot. Witnesses described him pacing in circles, voice raised, sweat visible under harsh terminal lights. But as investigators upstairs began analyzing Aria's files, it became clear Damien's narrative was collapsing. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was comprehensive, leaving no room for manipulation or escape. The company's CEO arrived shortly after, his expression cold and unreadable as he was escorted to a private viewing room inside the tower. There, investigators played the recordings Aria had unearthed, the same ones that exposed the conspiracy to steal her project and force her termination. Those present said the CEO's shoulders visibly tensed upon hearing his daughter's voice discussing offshore guarantees and clearing Aria from the board's path. For the first time since the scandal began, the CEO appeared shaken. Aria stood in the background of the room, silent, composed, watching the downfall unfold. Several witnesses noted that she didn't gloat, didn't interrupt, didn't even look at Damien when his image appeared on the surveillance feed from downstairs. Her focus was purely on ensuring the truth was laid bare. "She wasn't there for revenge," an investigator remarked. "She was there for justice, and she executed it with absolute precision." Tension peaked when the CEO demanded to speak with his daughter privately, but investigators denied the request, citing obstruction risks. The refusal reportedly sent him into a rare moment of fury, shouting that the situation was being blown out of proportion. But when officials presented him with banking documents Aria had decrypted, documents tracing funds directly back to his personal accounts, his protests abruptly ceased. The scandal had breached the highest level of leadership. Meanwhile, news began to leak to the media. A whistleblower inside the company anonymously confirmed to journalists that a major executive scandal was unfolding at the airport, with one insider calling it the most explosive corporate meltdown of the decade. Reporters swarmed the perimeter, cameras lifted toward the tower where Aria and investigators continued dismantling the conspiracy layer by layer. Inside the tower, officials initiated the final stage of their operation, freezing all associated accounts, issuing detainment orders for Damien and the CEO's daughter, and securing the stolen project files. Aria was quietly thanked by multiple agents for her cooperation and the extraordinary clarity of the evidence she compiled. But she waved off the praise, insisting only that her name be cleared and the truth formally documented. As the night deepened, Damien and the CEO's daughter were escorted from the terminal in separate vehicles, both under investigative custody. The control tower lights dimmed one by one as the crisis entered containment. And at the center of it all, standing against a panoramic window overlooking the silent runway she had personally shut down, Aria remained steady, calm, unbroken and victorious. At dawn, the fallout from last night's airport confrontation reached the heart of the corporation. The executive boardroom. What should have been a routine emergency meeting erupted into a full-scale internal implosion as investigators delivered preliminary findings directly to the board. Shockwaves rippled across the mahogany table when officials confirmed that Damien Ward, the CEO's daughter, and two sitting board members had orchestrated a coordinated scheme to seize Aria Sullivan's billion-dollar project for an offshore venture. Several executives reportedly attempted to distance themselves immediately, claiming ignorance of the conspiracy. But investigators countered with digital transcripts Aria supplied, documents proving that key decision-makers had received altered financial reports designed to paint Aria as a liability. The atmosphere grew suffocating as board members realized they had been manipulated into participating in her downfall. The CEO, still visibly shaken from the confrontation in the control tower, struggled to maintain authority as the investigators outlined the timeline of the sabotage. His voice reportedly cracked when he learned that his daughter had forged his authorization signature to approve the secret offshore deal. Witnesses described the room as frozen, the silence so heavy it felt like the entire corporation was holding its breath. With the evidence mounting, the investigators shifted their focus to the illegal redirection of company funds. Screens displayed damning financial trails, wire transfers, dummy accounts, encrypted receipts, many of which Damien orchestrated using his access to confidential financial systems. One investigator bluntly stated that the scheme could qualify as corporate fraud on an international scale, exposing the company to severe legal penalties. The tension escalated when the CFO confronted the CEO about the unauthorized use of executive accounts. The exchange quickly devolved into a heated argument, with accusations flying across the room. For the first time in his career, the CEO found himself on the defensive as both investigators and colleagues demanded accountability for his daughter's actions and his oversight failure. Outside the boardroom, employees gathered in unusually dense clusters, anxiously monitoring leaked updates circulating through internal chats. Rumors erupted, some claiming arrests were imminent, others speculating the CEO was preparing to resign. One employee described the building's atmosphere as a skyscraper on the verge of collapse, its foundation shaken by secrets finally exposed. Mid-meeting, officials announced a stunning development. The encrypted files Aria had recovered contained not only proof of stolen intellectual property but also voice logs implicating a senior board member as the mastermind behind the project theft. Gasps filled the room. The accused board member attempted to leave but was immediately stopped by federal agents stationed outside the door. His removal sent a chilling message. No one was above the unraveling truth. As the chaos intensified, a representative from the Corporate Integrity Agency addressed the board, confirming that a full federal audit of the company's financial systems would commence immediately. This announcement shattered any remaining illusions of internal containment. Executives paled, realizing the scandal was now expanding beyond corporate borders into a national case. And then came the moment no one expected. The board formally requested Aria Sullivan to appear. They needed to hear directly from the woman whose firing triggered the unraveling of their entire leadership hierarchy. Word spread quickly that Aria was on her way to the tower, A symbolic return that employees were already calling the comeback no one could have scripted. As Aria stepped off the elevator and onto the executive floor, whispers filled the hallway. She wasn't escorted this time. She wasn't carrying a termination packet. She wasn't walking out. She was walking in. And the boardroom doors, once slammed shut against her, were now opening wide. The terminal descended into chaos as Damien lunged for the emergency exit, realizing too late that Aria had outmaneuvered him. Security officers closed in from every direction, summoned moments earlier by Aria's anonymous tip. His plan to flee with the CEO's daughter had collapsed the instant Aria exposed their forged documents to airport authorities. The glossy confidence he once flaunted had evaporated, replaced by a frantic desperation that made the crowd step back in alarm. Aria moved forward slowly, no longer the woman who had once trembled under his betrayal. She carried herself with the authority of someone who had rebuilt herself from the ashes he created. The boarding pass that once symbolized her humiliation was now the evidence that cornered him. Reporters who had swarmed the airport minutes earlier turned their cameras toward her, recognizing the central figure in the corporate scandal story that had ignited nationwide outrage. Damien shouted that she had framed him, but no one believed the man whose lies had become primetime headlines. The CEO's daughter stood several meters behind him, stunned and hollow-eyed, realizing she had been merely a pawn in his ambition. Aria watched her carefully. Despite everything, the young woman looked more lost than malicious. Aria nodded to one of the officers, signaling that the girl should be escorted gently. Revenge wasn't the point anymore. Truth was. As Damien was handcuffed, he twisted to glare at Aria with venom. "You ruined everything," he spat. But Aria didn't flinch. "No," she replied calmly. "You destroyed yourself. I simply stopped you from taking more people down with you." Her voice floated above the chaos, steady and razor-sharp, instantly captured by dozens of microphones pointed in her direction. The lead investigator approached Aria with a respectful nod. He confirmed that the evidence she provided, financial transfers, internal emails, meeting recordings, was enough to charge Damien with corporate sabotage, breach of fiduciary duty, and attempted fraud involving the CEO's daughter. For the first time since the morning she was fired, Aria felt her lungs expand fully, as though someone had finally lifted a weight from her chest. But the story didn't end with Damien's arrest. The CEO himself arrived minutes later after being informed of the incident. His expression was shaken, burdened by a mixture of paternal fear and executive fury. When he reached Aria, he bowed his head slightly. An apology in front of reporters, employees, and the world. "You were wronged," he admitted. "And we were blind." Aria didn't expect the apology, but she accepted it with grace. The CEO then offered something even more startling. Reinstatement at a higher position, full authority over the billion-dollar project she had originally created. The board, pressured by public scrutiny and newfound clarity, unanimously demanded her return. Her name, once dragged through mud, now shone brighter than the headlines that had tried to bury her. As cameras flashed, Aria addressed the media with poise. She didn't blame the company, nor did she paint herself as a victim. Instead, she spoke about integrity, resilience, and the cost of unchecked ambition. Her statement went viral within minutes, praised as one of the most powerful corporate speeches of the year. This time, she wasn't just a rising star. She was a force. The morning after Damien's arrest, the entire corporate world erupted like a struck match. News outlets replayed the airport footage endlessly. Damien's desperate sprint, the officers closing in, and Aria standing unmoved in the center of the storm. Her calm stare into the cameras, paired with her sharp statement on integrity, became the centerpiece of every headline. What had begun as a humiliating firing had transformed into the most sensational corporate scandal of the year. At headquarters, employees whispered Aria's name with a mixture of awe and relief. Many had silently suspected something was wrong in the upper ranks, but no one had dared to challenge the boardroom's politics. Her return symbolized something larger than justice. It was the first crack of light piercing through the darkness that had been festering inside the company for years. As she entered the building for the first time since her termination, the lobby quieted, then erupted into applause that echoed like thunder. The board convened an emergency meeting, this time with Aria seated at the center table instead of standing outside as a dismissed employee. They reviewed her project, her evidence, and her proposals with newfound respect. The CEO formally announced the restructuring of internal oversight, crediting Aria with exposing the core vulnerability that had nearly cost the company billions. For a moment, Aria felt the surreal weight of what she had fought to reclaim, and how close she had come to losing it forever. Yet even with Damien behind bars, shadows remained. The investigators informed her that parts of the sabotage extended further than expected. Emails hinted at additional unnamed collaborators who had assisted Damien in manipulating resources, timing, and votes. Someone else had been pulling strings from inside the company, and that person hadn't surfaced yet. The revelation chilled her, turning triumph into tension. Aria spent hours poring over documents, timelines, and digital footprints. Every detail mattered now. The billion-dollar project she had built was no longer just a business venture. It was the vessel that hid the fingerprints of those who had tried to dismantle her career. And as she dug deeper, she began noticing inconsistencies she had previously overlooked. Financial anomalies, unusual approvals, and encrypted messages tied to a board member who had been suspiciously quiet since the scandal broke. Reporters camped outside her apartment building, desperate for new details. But Aria refused interviews until she understood the full extent of what Damien had set in motion. She wasn't walking blindly into another trap. She wouldn't allow anyone to rip control from her hands again. This time, she intended to dismantle the entire network that had tried to bury her. The CEO, sensing the storm ahead, invited Aria to a private dinner to discuss the company's future. He admitted that his daughter had provided her own testimony, revealing that Damien had received confidential data from someone much higher in the corporate chain. Aria's suspicions sharpened. She asked for the names, but the CEO paused, hesitating. "You won't like it," he warned. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, a sign that the next battle would be far more dangerous. When she finally stepped back into her office, her nameplate newly polished, her files carefully restored, Aria found an anonymous envelope waiting on her desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing 3 typed words. "You're next, Aria." No signature. No clue. Just a threat poised like a blade. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Fear flickered, but fire burned brighter. The company thought they had seen the peak of the scandal, but they hadn't seen anything yet. There was a deeper game unfolding, one that went far beyond Damien's betrayal. Someone powerful had decided she was now an obstacle. The anonymous threat echoed in Aria's mind long after she locked her office door. For the first time since Damien's downfall, the building felt colder, like polished marble could suddenly fracture beneath her heels. She knew the message wasn't an empty scare tactic. Whoever sent it had access to her office. Access to her schedule. Access to her. And that meant her enemy wasn't hiding in the shadows outside the company. They were sitting comfortably inside its highest floor. Within hours, Aria contacted the lead investigator, handing over the envelope and demanding a forensic sweep of her office. The team moved quickly, combing through security footage and access logs. But what unsettled Aria was how clean the trail appeared. No unauthorized entries. No unusual movements. No suspicious keycard swipes. It was as if the threat had materialized out of thin air, an impossibility that narrowed the suspect list to a chilling degree. As she waited for updates, Aria convened a confidential meeting with the CEO. His expression darkened the moment she presented the message. He admitted, voice low and strained, that internal audits had revealed another troubling pattern. Months of manipulated votes during board decisions, all subtly steering the company in directions favorable to an unknown party. Damien had never been smart enough to orchestrate something of this scale alone. There was a mastermind. Someone who had been planning long before Aria entered the spotlight. Their conversation was interrupted when the head of cybersecurity rushed in, breathless. He showed Aria a single still image extracted from corrupted surveillance footage, a partially obscured figure slipping into the executive wing late at night. The timestamp was only 3 hours before Aria found the threat on her desk. Most of the figure was blurred, but a distinctive accessory stood out. A platinum cufflink engraved with the company's old emblem. Only 3 executives still owned that vintage design. Aria's stomach tightened. She knew all 3 names. The first was a harmless retiree who barely showed up to meetings. The second was a notoriously silent board member who avoided confrontations. The third was the acting chief financial officer, Victor Hale, Damien's longtime mentor and the man who had always smiled a little too broadly when Aria failed, and a little too thinly when she succeeded. Aria felt the room tilt. Victor controlled budgets, approvals, and high-level data access. He could have easily funneled confidential documents to Damien. He could have manipulated financial records and board votes. And he definitely had the power to walk into her office without raising a single alarm. The realization hit her like a sledgehammer. Victor wasn't just involved, he was the architect. Determined to confront the truth, Aria marched toward the CFO's wing. But before she arrived, a sudden blackout plunged the entire floor into darkness. Emergency lights flickered to life a second later, casting the hallway in sickly red. Security alarms blared, echoing off the walls. Someone had breached the system. Someone wanted panic. Someone wanted her vulnerable. Through the dim glow, Aria saw movement at the far end of the corridor. Victor stepping out of his office, adjusting his cufflink with eerie calm, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. His eyes met hers, cold and unreadable. Slowly, he smiled. The emergency lights painted Victor's face in flickering crimson, turning his calm expression into something predatory. Aria stood frozen for a moment, not out of fear, but out of the realization that everything she had unraveled so far was only the surface. Victor wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was presenting himself, openly, confidently, because he believed he still controlled the game. And that terrified her more than his threat itself. Before she could speak, the alarms abruptly cut off. The hallway fell into an eerie silence, amplifying the echo of Victor's footsteps as he approached. He explained with chilling casualness that the blackout had been triggered remotely. A simple demonstration, he claimed, showing her how deeply he controlled the infrastructure she thought she was reclaiming. Damien was useful, he said, but replaceable. You, however, you've become a problem. Aria forced herself to step closer, refusing to back down. She demanded to know why he sabotaged her project, why he pushed Damien into corporate betrayal, why he wanted her removed. Victor chuckled softly, as though she were asking a naive question. He revealed the truth she never expected. The billion-dollar project she created, her masterpiece, interfered with a secret acquisition he'd been orchestrating for years. If she succeeded, it would expose the financial corruption he had buried across multiple subsidiaries. The magnitude of his scheme hit her like a punch. This wasn't about personal vendettas. This was about billions, power, and a future he intended to control from the shadows. Damien had been nothing more than a puppet he pulled by the strings. Aria realized then that her firing hadn't been a spontaneous betrayal. It was a carefully calculated operation designed to eliminate the only person capable of unmasking him. Suddenly, footsteps thundered up the stairwell. Security teams burst into the corridor, armed with flashlights and urgently calling Aria's name. Victor's smile didn't falter. In one smooth motion, he stepped back into the darkness, blending into the shadows with unnerving precision. Before disappearing completely, he whispered, "You're out of your depth, Aria. Stop digging, or you won't like what comes next." By the time security reached her, Victor was gone, vanished between emergency stairwells and offline cameras. Aria ordered the entire floor locked down and demanded access to every security backup. But when the tech team tried to retrieve the footage, they discovered massive data corruption. Files tied to Victor's movements, financial records, and digital correspondence had all been wiped clean. Every trace of his involvement evaporated within the span of 15 minutes. The CEO arrived moments later, pale and shaken after learning about the blackout. Aria reported the confrontation, naming Victor as the mastermind. But the CEO hesitated. Victor had been his most trusted advisor for over a decade, the man who saved the company during a financial crisis years earlier. Accepting Aria's accusation meant admitting that the company's foundation had been rotten for far longer than anyone realized. As the CEO struggled to process the truth, Aria received a notification on her phone. The investigators needed her immediately. They had discovered something shocking in Damien's newly unsealed email archive. Encrypted files labeled VH, timestamps matching critical board decisions,